That is another ancient rule. Heroes, on the other hand, have certain privileges. They can go anywhere, challenge anyone, as long as they're bold enough and strong enough to do it. No god can be held responsible for a hero's actions. Hi, hello, welcome to my channel. I am Jan, and we are here to discuss The Lightning Thief, the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. In this novel, 12-year-old Percy Jackson is on the verge of getting kicked out of yet another boarding school when Greek mythological figures begin popping up in his day-to-day. And now, he is the prime suspect in the theft of Zeus's master bolt, and must go on a quest to prove his innocence by retrieving the stolen object before war breaks out. The story begins with a warning to young readers. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is, close this book right now. Believe what lie your mom or dad told you about your birth, and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us. And once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. So with that chilling bit of information, we press on. On a May day in New York City, Percy and his class are on a field trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a favorite location of Rick Riordan's apparently. Percy's always getting into trouble, weird accidents that end up with him at the center. He hoped that this trip would be different.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
On the way there, he puts up with the bullying from his classmate, Nancy Bobofit. His friend Grover Underwood is there. He has difficulty walking, and he's always there for Percy. They all attend Yancey Academy together, a boarding school in upstate New York. They're joined by their teacher, Mr. Brunner, a man in a wheelchair and Percy's favorite teacher, and Mrs. Dodds, Percy's algebra teacher, and less than favorite teacher. Mr. Brunner, the Latin teacher, is leading the class on a tour of the classical exhibit, explaining the Greek artifacts to the kids as Nancy throws pieces of her lunch at Grover. Percy has to resist doing anything about it because he can't afford to get in trouble again. He almost gets in trouble when Mr. Brunner asks Percy how Greek mythology is relevant to his day-to-day life, and tells him as they break for lunch that he must learn the answer to this question. Percy mentions how the weather across the state of New York has been strange since Christmas. He also hasn't been home since Christmas, where he lives with his mother and stepdad in an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. During lunch, Percy finally has had enough of Nancy and her BS, and somehow she winds up in the fountain without Percy ever touching her. Several kids make note about how it looked like the water grabbed Nancy. Mrs. Dodds, Nancy is her favorite for some reason, materializes out of nowhere. She demands Percy come with her, and she leads him deep into the museum, back into the Greek and Roman section. She wants Percy to confess to something, but he's clueless about what she could mean. Then she changes form into a leathery bat monster, but Mr. Brunner wheels himself inside and tosses Percy a ballpoint pen. As he dodges her attack, he catches the pen that's now become a sword. Percy slashes at Mrs. Dodds, and she disintegrates into a pile of sand. Percy is left there, alone, holding a pen.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Percy runs outside where it's raining, and Nancy makes a comment about a teacher named Mrs. Kerr. No one remembers a Mrs. Dodds ever being at Yancey. Percy deals with this strangeness for the rest of the school year too, and the only reason Percy knows anything is up is because Grover is a terrible liar. More freak weather events continue to happen throughout the spring semester as well. Percy gets into more fights and his grades slip further. It isn't until he snaps at a teacher that he is finally expelled from Yancey Academy. One night as he's trying to study, Percy relents and decides to ask Mr. Brunner for help. It's there he overhears Grover speaking with the teacher about what happened in May at the Met, and something about a summer solstice deadline, a kindly one, and keeping Percy alive. This startles Percy, causing him to drop his book and run, and hide in a nearby classroom. He hears weird clopping sounds in the hallway, and then he hears Mr. Brunner telling Grover that he needs to get some rest. When he's sure no one is in the hallway, he sneaks back to his dorm where Grover is lying already in bed. Percy avoids Grover, knowing now that they think that he's in danger somehow.
What's that supposed to mean?
The next day after his Latin exam, Percy is spoken to by Mr. Brunner, but Percy misinterprets Mr. Brunner's words and tears up, feeling hurt by his favorite teacher. The last day of term, Percy and Grover catch a Greyhound into Manhattan together. Percy decides to check Grover on what he overheard. Grover tries lying, but Percy sees right through it. Grover gives him a business card telling him to contact him if he needs help that summer. Grover also tells him that he's Percy's protector. Percy's confused by this, wondering what Grover is protecting him from. Their convo is interrupted by the bus breaking down on the side of an empty stretch of road. As the driver repairs it, Percy spots 3 old women across the road, knitting a pair of long socks, when one of them takes out a pair of shears and clips the thread. Grover ushers Percy back on the bus as it roars to life. Grover asks Percy what he saw, and he tells him, causing Grover to panic. Grover mentions something about this not being like last time, and how they never make it past 6th grade.
Shit, here we go again.
He asks Percy to allow him to walk him home from the bus station at least, and Percy agrees. Grover makes a strange gesture, a warding off evil thing with his hand, like in front of his chest, and then Percy asks if the cut thread means someone is going to die, which is a very strange and specific question, and I feel like Percy knows what's going on, he just doesn't want to say it. Percy then ditches Grover at the bus terminal, taking a taxi up to East 184th and 1st. At home, we meet Gabe Ugliano, Percy's unfortunately named stepfather, who's also abusive. He's playing poker with his friends when Percy comes home, and he starts pestering him. Percy stomps into his room, feeling overcome with a sense of dread before his mother, Sally Jackson, comes in to welcome him home. She's brought him a bag of candy from her job at Grand Central, and he eats it as they sit together on his bed. She tells him that once she gets changed, they'll drive over to Montauk to stay in a cabin for 3 days, just the 2 of them. As they're getting ready to leave in Gabe's car, he reminds Percy not to leave a scratch on his Camaro. That's called foreshadowing. Percy mimics the gesture Grover did on the bus, and the screen door slams Gabe in the back, and they drive away. On the drive to the cabin, Sally seems to lose all her worries. Percy guesses it's because that's where she met his real dad. At the cabin, Percy and his mom enjoy an evening together, eating blue food. You see, blue food is a point of contention with Gabe, so Sally goes out of her way to eat blue food like the rebel she is, because Sally Jackson is a badass. And that night, Sally tells Percy she had no choice but to send him away in order to keep him safe. He asks her from what, and thinks about all the creepy things that happened throughout his life. That time he swore he saw a one-eyed man stalking him, or the time he was put down for a nap and killed a snake that was in his cot. She tells him that his dad wanted her to send him to a special summer camp, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. That night, Percy has a weird dream about a horse and an eagle fighting on a beach in a storm. When he awakens, there is a hurricane raging outside and someone is banging at the door. Sally opens it to Grover, telling her he's been searching. Sally tells him then to get into the car, and Percy is shocked by the fact that Grover has goat legs.
What are those?
As they drive away in the storm, Grover tells Percy that he is a satyr, half man, half goat, and how he had to lie to Percy because the less he knew, the less attention he would attract. Percy asks who could be after him, and Grover says the Lord of the Dead and his minions.
Who?
They pass a strawberry field, and Grover tells Percy they're taking him to the summer camp Sally told him about. And those old ladies were actually the Fates, who only cut the thread of life when someone's life ends. We're still in the first act, and already the action is already at a 10. Then the car is struck by lightning, and they swerve off the road into a ditch. Sally tells Percy to run as they spot a large, fuzzy man in the distance.
Oh, why do I have to run every 8 minutes of my life?
Sally tells Percy to run to the top of a hill where there is a large pine tree, and to get to the farmhouse in the valley there. Percy refuses to leave without his mom, as the creature, a minotaur, approaches. They grab Grover and begin to run toward the hill. It stops to sniff the car. The minotaur had poor eyesight and hearing, and it throws it and it explodes. Percy and Sally work together to avoid the monster. They play a game of, well, Matador? That's what it's called? Is the Matador the person, or is it the game? Anyway, they get to the top of the hill, but Sally can't cross over. And when she tries to lead the monster away, it catches her and crushes her into a golden explosion of light.
No, God!
I'm sure it must have been beautiful as Percy died inside. Percy gets so mad though, he does the impossible, fighting the Minotaur with his bare hands, ripping off one of its horns and stabbing the creature. and it explodes into dust, just like Mrs. Dodds. Filled with grief, Percy grabs Grover and they limp over the hill and make it to the farmhouse porch before Percy passes out. The last thing he sees is a familiar-looking bearded man and a pretty girl who the man calls Annabeth. Percy's in and out of it for the next few days as he recuperates, waking once to the pretty girl spoon-feeding him some kind of pudding. She questions him about what's going to happen on the summer solstice, but Percy is once again clueless. The next time he woke up, he saw a husky guy with eyeballs all over his body, and promptly passes out again. It's protagonist energy if you're always passing out. The next time he wakes up on a deck chair overlooking a beautiful field, Grover is there, and he gives Percy the Minotaur horn, reminding Percy of everything that happened, including losing his mom. Percy then drinks a glass of amber liquid that surprisingly tastes like homemade chocolate chip cookies. It makes him feel energized and refreshed. He's drinking nectar, the drink of the gods. It's what gives demigods renewed strength and stuff. It's like a mana potion, I guess. Is that how that works? I don't know, I don't play enough video games. Then Grover takes Percy to Chiron and Mr. D.
Who?
They're on the porch playing cards. The pretty girl is there, who Grover introduces as Annabeth Chase. She's been there longer than most campers. Mr. Brunner welcomed Percy to Camp Half-Blood and sent Annabeth to ready Percy's bunk at Cabin 11. Turns out, Chiron is Mr. Brunner's real name, and he went to Yancey Academy to oversee Percy himself, something he very rarely does. He tells Percy that the Greek gods are real and how Mr. D is one of them. Percy correctly deduces that he must be Dionysus, god of wine. Dionysus is there as punishment for chasing a wood nymph. He takes Grover inside to talk to him about his performance as Percy's protector. Percy wonders who he is, and Chiron reassures him that they'll come to learn that soon enough. And then he stands up and reveals his horse legs.
What are those?
Chiron takes Percy on a tour of the camp, the volleyball court, the strawberry fields that are sold to restaurants in New York and Olympus. Percy asks Chiron if Grover would be okay, but he doesn't know, saying it's up to Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders, whoever those people are. Grover has big dreams and failed to prove himself the first time 5 years ago. This was his second chance at doing so. When Percy tries asking about the underworld, Chiron distracts him by showing him the camp woods, which Chiron warns are stocked and none should go in unarmed. Again, whatever that means. He then shows Percy the rest of camp, like the canoeing lake, archery range, the stables, the amphitheater, the arena, the mess hall, and finally the cabins. 12 in all, arranged in a U formation, and the center is a fire pit, tended to by a small girl of about 9. Each cabin belongs to an Olympian, and they find Annabeth outside cabin 11. The cabin is crowded with kids, so many that some even sleep on the floor in sleeping bags. A 19-year-old boy named Luke welcomes Percy. Percy is undetermined, which means they don't know which cabin he belongs to. Cabin 11 welcomes all unclaimed newcomers. Annabeth drags Percy out, explaining to him how lucky he was to get the chance to fight the Minotaur, even though Percy doesn't see it that way. Then she explains that monsters don't die, they reform after some time in Tartarus. Then she explains how cabins are based on who your parent is, Percy's dad specifically. She tells him how his moving from school to school, how his ADHD and dyslexia mark him as one of them, how he wouldn't survive consuming ambrosia or nectar if he wasn't like them, a half-blood. Their convo is cut short by Clarice LaRue, daughter of Ares. She tries giving Percy a swirly, but something strange happens that causes the toilet water to blast Clarice and her minions, scaring them off. Annabeth says she wants Percy on her team for Capture the Flag on Friday. Sorry if my moving around is a little disorienting or distracting. I'm just trying to find a comfortable position to help convey this recap. After Annabeth shows Percy the rest of camp, Percy realizes half-blood must mean half-god. Annabeth tells him his dad isn't dead. He's an Olympian god.
Thank you, Catherine Obvious.
The kids at Camp Half-Blood are demigods, and Annabeth belongs to Cabin 6 for Athena, goddess of war and wisdom. Percy's parentage is undetermined, and it'll stay that way unless he decides to claim Percy with a sign of some kind. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Gods can be neglectful to their children that way. She tells Percy that unless his dad is a big deal, he might only need to be a summer camper instead of a year-rounder like Annabeth. Monsters go after demigods in the mortal world, especially the more powerful ones, but monsters and mortals can't get into camp unless they're invited in. Then she shows Percy the leather-beaded necklace she wore that marks her having been there 5 years. Every August, campers get a new clay bead to mark another year of survival. Percy asks about leaving, but she says only those with permission can go, and that only happens for a quest. They get to talking about the summer solstice, and Annabeth mentions that she wishes she knew more, but that things have been strange since the winter solstice when her and other campers visited Mount Olympus, which is on the 600th floor of the Empire State Building. Annabeth figures something important was stolen, and then she leaves Percy to get ready for dinner. Percy goes back to the cabin and talks to Luke, who he says must be a son of Hermes, god of messengers, travelers, thieves. That's why Cabin 11 welcomes the undetermined. Percy asks Luke if he ever met his dad, and he says once and does not elaborate, so it can't be good. Percy asks Luke about prophecies, and he tells Percy that Annabeth is just anxious to go on a quest and was told she must wait for someone special. Then they go to dinner, where Percy is taught to offer a portion of his meal to the gods by throwing it into a fire. Then they file into the amphitheater, where the Apollo cabin leads the campers in a sing-along before everyone retires for the night. Percy spends the rest of the week learning ancient Greek, training, and trying out camp activities and failing at most of them, like wrestling and archery. Except he does very well at canoeing.
Coincidence? I think not!
That Thursday at sword practice in the arena, Luke is teaching Cabin 11. Percy does well at keeping up with the class, but Percy cannot find a sword that feels right in his hand. Luke demonstrates a disarming technique on Percy, which he very quickly is able to replicate but not consistently. Friday afternoon, as Grover and Percy are hanging by the lake, Grover tells Percy about how Mr. D didn't judge him as a success or a failure, and how he could gain a searcher license only if Percy gets a quest, and he goes along, and they both survive. No big deal. He also tells Percy about the 4 empty cabins. Cabin 8 is Artemis, an honorary thing, as is Hera's cabin number 2. Cabin 1 and 3 belong to Zeus and Poseidon, respectively. Them and Hades make up the big 3, who swore on the river Styx not to have any more children after World War II. World War II was a result of the children of Zeus and Poseidon fighting against the children of Hades. Make of that what you will, do your judging. Children of the big 3 are more powerful than other demigods. But Zeus did break the rules once, siring a daughter, Thalia, who suffered a terrible fate. Thalia was protected by a satyr who tried to get her to camp, but she perished defending her friends at the top of Half-Blood Hill. Her spirit still protects the camp to this day. Percy asks if a demigod has ever gone to the underworld, and Grover tells him sure. Orpheus, Heracles, Houdini.
Who?
Grover tells him how satyrs are sent into the mortal schools to try and find demigods and bring them to camp. That night is Capture the Flag. Team Ares versus Athena. The Hermes cabin is allied with Athena's, so Percy is working with Annabeth, who assigns him to a spot out of the way guarding the borderline. Clarice and her friends try to come at Percy, and they get the upper hand until he lands in the creek, and suddenly he's able to stand toe-to-toe with 5 Ares campers and even breaks Clarice's electric spear. That's when they hear a commotion as Luke crosses the boundary carrying the Ares team flag, winning the game for Team Athena. Annabeth materializes out of nowhere holding a Yankees cap and notices how Percy's arm wound had healed itself after he stepped into the water. Their moment is interrupted by the appearance of a hellhound. It jumps at Percy but is quickly put down by a barrage of arrows. Annabeth then has Percy stand in the water, healing all his wounds. Then, a trident symbol appears over Percy's head. His father has claimed him, Poseidon, god of the sea, horses, and earthquakes. Percy is immediately moved into Cabin 3 all by himself, feeling miserable. Everyone begins treating him differently now. He even wakes up one morning to a newspaper in his cabin. It talks about how him and his mother are still missing. Somebody at camp has it out for him. Percy has a bad dream that night about 2 men fighting in a storm, arguing about give it back, and a voice calls from the earth for Percy to come down. He wakes up to Grover knocking, telling him that Mr. D requests him at the big house. Mr. D warns him that he should not exist, and that he better not see him there when he gets back from Mount Olympus. Chiron fills Percy in on what's been going on amongst the gods. Zeus's master bolt is missing, and he believed that Poseidon had a human steal it for him, specifically Percy Jackson. Chiron thinks if Percy goes on a quest to retrieve the bolt by the summer solstice on June 21st, it would be the peace offering to prevent war amongst the gods. He tells Percy to go up to the attic and speak with the oracle. In the attic, amongst the spoil of war, sits a mummified corpse of the Oracle of Delphi. She gives Percy the following prophecy. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend, and you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. Percy goes back downstairs, but is tight-lipped about the prophecy details, only sharing the good news of the first line. Kieran tells him they'll need to go to the underworld in Los Angeles and must travel overland. They cannot fly because Zeus. Quite often, when it comes to mythology, usually the main culprit is because Zeus. Finally, Annabeth takes off her invisibility cap and tells them she's going with them, and Percy agrees. They pack, taking gold drachmas, ambrosia, and nectar along. Annabeth brings her cap and a dagger, and Grover brings his panpipes and some tin cans. Before they leave, Luke gives Percy a pair of flying winged sneakers. Percy gifts them to Grover instead. Finally, Kieran gives Percy with a ballpoint pen that can turn into a sword. Its name is Anuklusmos, or Riptide.
I was scared of dentists and the dark.
He tells him that it's made from celestial bronze, the only metal that is deadly to monsters. He also tells him it's enchanted to always appear in Percy's pocket. Percy asks what came before the gods, and Kieran mentions that the Titans were the ones who ruled before. Argus, the guy with eyes all over his body, takes them as far as the bus terminal in Manhattan, where they board a bus bound west. So close to his home, Percy wonders about it. Grover mentions the reason Sally married Gabe was to protect Percy. His smell masks the scent of Percy, even from monsters. Alright, you can see I'm wearing my Fang necklace now. I tried looking for my puka shell necklace that I had, but I couldn't find it, which is very upsetting. Anyway, the Furies, or Kindly Ones, board the bus led by Mrs. Dodds. They're looking for Percy, but Annabeth has him wear her invisibility cap to sneak past. He does, and as the bus comes out of the Lincoln Tunnel, he takes the wheel and they crash into the woods. It distracts the Furies long enough for the trio to attack them, and then they run off the bus as lightning strikes it, destroying their luggage along with it. While wandering northern New Jersey, they come across a place called Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium. It's full of realistic-looking statues. A woman in a veil greets them, offering them refreshments. Grover notices one of the statues resembles his uncle Ferdinand.
Coincidence? I think not!
It isn't until Auntie M goes to take their photograph that Annabeth realizes something is wrong. She pushes Percy and Grover down, slips on her Yankees cap, and they split up. Auntie M reveals herself to be Medusa. Annabeth tells Percy to use a reflective surface to sneak up on her and cut her head off. It works, much to their relief. They wrap up her head and rest for a moment. Percy searches Medusa's office and finds the address for the Underworld DOA recording studios, West Hollywood, California. Then he mails Medusa's head to Olympus. Percy's a lot like his mother in that regard, in that he's very rebellious, and he's very angry with the gods, especially now. Later as they're camping, Grover tells Percy that he wants to find the god Pan, because of the way humanity has treated the earth in his absence. He also mentions how him and Annabeth had talked and realized something is wrong with their quest. The Furies were looking for something. Grover takes watch as Percy sleeps. That night, Percy has a dream that a voice is calling from him from a cavern. Then, in the morning, Grover finds a poodle, and they return the dog to their owner and receive a reward, enough to buy Amtrak tickets west. They spend 2 days on the train. Percy mentions how his photo is in newspapers, and how he's wanted for questioning in the disappearance of his mother.
That's rough, buddy.
On the train ride, Annabeth and Percy have a heart-to-heart, bonding over their awful childhoods. She tells him about how her dad resents her existence, and she ran away at 7. How she ran into unexpected friends who helped her get to Camp Half-Blood. She also tells him that she wants to be an architect when she grows up. They get off at Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri, and go to visit the St. Louis Arch. In the museum, Percy asks about Hades' invisibility hat, the Helm of Darkness, and how do they know he isn't watching them at that moment? Creepy. They ride up the elevator with the woman and her chihuahua. As Grover and Annabeth ride down afterwards, the woman reveals herself to be Echidna, and the dog is actually the Chimera. Percy fights off the Chimera, who bites him, releasing venom. It's no use as he eventually jumps through a hole in the wall the monster made to get to safety. When in doubt, check out. He lands in the Mississippi River where he learns he can not only breathe underwater, but he doesn't even get wet. A water spirit visits him, sent by his father. She tells him to go to Santa Monica and to not trust the gifts, whatever that means.
What's that supposed to mean?
Is it talking about the shoes? Is it talking about the pen? Which gift specifically, you know? He meets back up with the others and the trio make it back to the train as it heads out again. Percy is now wanted in connection with the explosion in the arch. When they get to Denver, they send an Iris message to camp. This book really dates itself with the idea of IMing, because IMing stands for iris messaging, which is the only way that demigods can communicate. They use rainbows to send messages back and forth because Iris is the goddess of rainbows and messengers. Luke picks up the call, and they fill each other in on what's been happening. Luke tells Percy about how the camp has divided, taking sides in the Zeus-Poseidon conflict. He also asks Percy how the shoes fit before they're disconnected. Later they meet the god Ares in a diner. He promises them he can get them going west if they do him a favor. He's lost his shield at an amusement park because gods are always losing things, and he needs the heroes to retrieve it. He also mentions how Zeus originally sent him and other Olympians out to search for his bolt, and if he couldn't find it, then he doubts Percy can.
You raggedy bitch.
They go to Waterland. It's a rundown amusement park, so it's empty. On the Tunnel of Love ride, Grover stays up top while Percy and Annabeth climb into the empty pool. They find not only Ares' shield, but Aphrodite's scarf. When Percy picks it up, he starts getting all dreamy, but then they activate a trap set by Hephaestus to catch Ares and Aphrodite. You see how the gods are always being petty? This is a never-ending cycle with them, and something we will constantly see throughout the series. It releases thousands of mechanical spiders, which sends Annabeth into a state of fear and panic. Percy uses his water bending to rupture the pipes and send them down the Tunnel of Love, saving them. But there is a blockage at the end, and Annabeth helps guide them to jump at just the right moment to save them, and they crash land onto the pavement with the help of Grover. They meet Ares back at the diner, where he tells them to board a Kindness International truck to LA. Percy can't stand the war god, but Ares does tell Percy that his mother is not dead. She was taken by Hades. He also gifts them a backpack full of toiletries, clean clothes, and other essentials. You know what they say, don't trust Greeks bearing gifts. On the truck ride, Annabeth tells Percy how she has a fear of spiders because of Arachne. Athena beat Arachne in a weaving contest, but Arachne's children have sworn revenge ever since on Athena's children. You see that? Petty. Grover also tells Percy he was the satyr who tried to protect Thalia, along with Luke and Annabeth. That was the first time he messed up. When Grover falls asleep, Annabeth and Percy get to talking about her beaded necklace, how the symbol on each bead was chosen based on the most important event that summer. The college ring on it was a gift from her father when he tried to make amends 2 years back. Annabeth had tried living at home, but she could never get along with her stepmother, and monsters kept attacking her anyway, so she wound up at Camp Half-Blood no matter what. Percy tells her not to give up, to try reaching out again to her father. Annabeth isn't so sure though. Percy has another dream vision, this time of Thalia, daughter of Zeus. Then he's falling and voices speaking from the shadows, something about deception within deception, 2 items failing to be delivered, and the voice also calls the other the crooked one. The voice realizes Percy is there, and the dream shifts to Hades' throne room, where Percy sees his mother, but can't reach her, and then he wakes up. He wakes up as they go into Vegas, where the kids work together to free the animals that are also in the truck. Apparently, it was part of some smuggling operation, according to the zebra that Percy talked to. Grover places a satyr sanctuary on them to help the animals reach safety. Percy asks Grover why they couldn't use the satyr sanctuary on themselves, but he says it only works on wild animals. Annabeth makes a smart comment about how it will only work on Percy. They eventually reach the Lotus Hotel and Casino and wander inside, where they're offered room keys and hotel credit cards. They get lost in the extravagance of the place before Percy realizes some of the patrons have been there for literally decades. When he is able to get Annabeth's attention, they have to drag Grover out. They realize they've been in the hotel for 5 days, with only 1 day left before the summer solstice. Time moves differently in magical locations, and the Lotus Eaters were responsible for trapping people like Odysseus in Greek mythology. Annabeth has a smart idea to take a taxi all the way to Santa Monica. She uses the Lotus Hotel cards they had to pay for the ride. They talk about Percy's dream along the way, but they can barely make heads or tails of it. Who could the voice in the pit be? And if Zeus's Master Bolt is the first item, what's the second? They arrive at Santa Monica Pier and Percy walks into the ocean. There, he speaks with the water spirit from the Mississippi. She says she's a Nereid, a sea spirit. She gives Percy 3 pearls and tells him what belongs to the sea will always return to the sea. She also tells him to listen to his heart. They then take a bus into West Hollywood, where they wander around for a while looking for DOA recording studios. When they run into a gang of teens, Percy tries swiping his sword at them, but celestial bronze cannot touch mortals. It just passes right through them and distracts them long enough for them to run, and they hide out in a place called Krusty's Waterbed Palace.
Oh, why do I have to run every 8 minutes of my life?
Inside, they meet a creepy guy named Krusty, who shows them all his beds. He says a magic word, and Annabeth and Grover wind up being tied to 2 beds, and Krusty says his full name is Procrustes, the Stretcher. Percy then uses the gift of gaslighting to trick the monster into trying out his own bed. It works, and Percy's able to trap him and chop off his head. They then find directions in the store to DOA Recording Studios, courtesy of a nearby compendium on LA area monsters. It's only a block away. Inside DOA Recording Studios, they find themselves in a lobby speaking to Charon, the ferryman of the dead. They give him a story about how they all died, a few drachma, and he's willing to take them into the land of the dead. They ride down the river Styx, which is polluted with the hopes and dreams of the dead. They meander through the gates of the underworld, which resembles airport security. Then the trio comes across Cerberus, who Annabeth is able to distract with a ball and some playtime, because all dogs is same. They hurry on by observing the fields of Asphodel as they pass through towards Hades' palace. That is, until suddenly, Grover's winged sneakers spring to life, taking him down towards a deep cavern. He almost slips through, but the others grab him, and he shakes off the shoes, barely escaping falling into Tartarus, the same chasm Percy has been having dreams about.
Coincidence? I think not!
They finally arrive at Hades' palace, and just walk right in and confront the god himself, who is shocked at Percy for keeping up his charade after what he's done. Hades explains that he doesn't want a war. His kingdom has already grown too large and chaotic. And yet, someone stole his Helm of Darkness, and Hades thinks Percy did it for his father as an ultimatum to ally with Poseidon. Percy insists that he's innocent, but Hades tells him to check his backpack, and Percy is shocked to find that inside is the Master Bolt. Hades demands he hand it over in exchange. He would give Percy his mother, or use the pearls, which can only save 1 person each, and he only has 3. Annabeth and Grover offer to stay, but Percy insists they can't. He gives them each a pearl, and together they all flee from Hades. Percy promises the god he will find and return his helm. He also makes a little promise to his mother that he'll return as well. They float up and wind up in the Pacific Ocean on the day of the summer solstice, and Los Angeles is on fire after a deadly earthquake caused by Hades. Percy knows who set him up and is dead set on confronting them. Did you figure out who it is yet? Can you guess? They're dropped off on the beach, and who else is there but the god who helps set things into motion, the real lightning thief.
He said it! He said it!
Ares, the god of war. But he didn't steal it himself. That's against the rules. He had someone else do that for him. He refuses to tell Percy who it could be, but Percy calls him on his bluff, knowing he didn't come up with the plan to steal the items himself. He just got lucky and caught the thief, and they made Ares an offer he couldn't refuse. Annabeth may be typecast as the smart one in the group, but Percy has his fair share of smart moments like this where he's able to solve things very quickly and put the pieces together. Percy strikes a bargain with the god. If Ares wins, he gets the Master Bolt. If Percy wins, he gets the bolt and the helm. They begin to duel.
It's time to duel!
At first, Ares has the upper hand, but Percy uses what he learned at camp to help take down the god in a sword fight. Ares leaves, revealing his true godly form, and the trio avert their gaze to avoid being disintegrated. The Furies show up, having witnessed a whole series of events. Percy tells them to report back to Hades and tosses them the helm. Our heroes agree they need to get to New York that night, so Percy suggests they fly.
Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind?
Reporters show up, mistaking Ares for a crazed gunman and kidnapper, and Percy for his helpless victim. Percy gives them a sob story, which works so well, they're able to raise enough money for 3 plane tickets to New York. Percy's very smart in this moment. He realizes that since Zeus is all-knowing and can see all, that he must know that Percy has the Master Bolt at this point. And so he wouldn't risk destroying it with Percy being on a plane, so he should allow him to fly without issue. The trio land in LaGuardia Airport and split up. Annabeth and Grover go back to camp to report to Chiron while Percy goes into Manhattan. He walks into the lobby of the Empire State Building and asks the front desk worker to let him up to the 500th floor. The worker claims there isn't one, but when he sees the Master Bolt, he immediately gives Percy the key card to get to the top floor, Mount Olympus. This is only the first book, and Percy has already had it with the gods' crap. Arriving at the throne room, he finds Zeus and Poseidon. He recounts what happened and how he suspects someone or something from that chasm was manipulating Ares. The gods whisper, and Percy could only make out the word, Father. Zeus leaves to go cleanse his Master Bolt. saying that the mortal world got it all filthy and stuff. He's a bit of a drama queen. He gives Percy some threats and vanishes. Percy tells Poseidon it's Kronos, the king of the Titans, but Poseidon tells him Zeus hasn't allowed further discussion on the matter, so they can't talk about it. Hush hush. Him and Percy have a heart-to-heart conversation, and he tells his son that when he goes home, he will not only find his mother safely returned because of Hades, but also a package and a choice to make. And he does. His mother is so happy to see him, but Gabe is being a jerk about the whole thing, threatening to call the police on Percy, a 12-year-old boy. Percy and his mom go to his room to talk. Percy finds the package there. It's the one he sent to Olympus, and it now says return to sender. He asks his mom if she wants Gabe gone, and she says yes, but she has to be the one to do it on her own terms. And Percy accepts this, and agrees to return to Camp Half-Blood. Back at camp, the trio are welcomed as heroes. Remember, they're the first campers to complete a quest since Luke had his quest a few years back, so it's a big deal for them. In celebration, they get to burn the burial shrouds that were made in case they never returned. Just in case. Annabeth's cabin made one for her, and Ares' cabin made Percy's, since Percy has no siblings, and Grover finally got his searcher's license. We are so happy for my boy, Grover. A week later, Percy got a letter from his mom that Gabe disappeared mysteriously one day.
Coincidence? I think not!
In unrelated news, she sold a statue she made called the Poker Player and got enough money for a new apartment and money towards her first semester at NYU. She also found a private school for Percy if he decided to be a summer camper and return for 7th grade. She is really out here mothering her ass off, and you love to see it. On the 4th of July, Grover leaves on his search for Pan, telling Annabeth and Percy goodbye for now. Then they watch the fireworks set up by the Hephaestus cabin. July goes by, and Percy is left uneasy, thinking about the lines of the prophecy. On the last day of the summer session at camp, Percy has a decision to make, whether to stay at camp year-round or go back to school and live with his mom in the mortal world. Instead of making that choice, he decides to go down to the arena to train. When in doubt, check out. There he finds Luke practicing sword fighting. He notices Luke's sword is made of 2 metals. Luke says it's new. Its name is Backbiter. It's made of celestial bronze and steel, able to kill mortals and monsters. Now why would you want that? Luke invites Percy to join him in the woods one final time to fight monsters, tempting him with a 6-pack of coke. Percy folds and follows him. They can't find any monsters, so they just sit and talk about quests and living in the mortal world versus living at camp. Then Luke announces he's leaving, and he's come to say goodbye. Then he summons a pit scorpion, and Percy thinks about the prophecy line, "You will be betrayed by one who calls you friend." Luke begins monologuing how his quests years back to steal an apple from the Garden of the Hesperides made him bitter against the gods. About how he stole the bolt after Kronos got into his dreams, tempting him with the promise to overthrow the gods and destroy Western civilization. But he got caught by Ares, and then he manipulated Ares with the help of Kronos to hold on to the item because Kronos knew another person would come along to help deliver them the rest of the way. Even the shoes he gifted Percy were cursed to drag him into Tartarus.
I was lying. I'm a fucking lie.
It's a little on the nose, but all the clues were there since the beginning. Luke's father is even the god of thieves and travelers, so who else was perfect but Luke to steal the Master Bolt? Luke then uses his sword to create a portal of darkness and disappears into it. Percy is able to kill the pit scorpion, but not before it's able to sting him. Percy is able to wander close to camp, but is saved by wood nymphs coming to his aid. He wakes up in the sick room of the big house, with Annabeth helping him drink nectar, like before. He tells her and Chiron what happened and says he has to go after Luke, but Chiron talks some sense into him. Percy asks if the prophecy Chiron heard involved Kronos, and if he and Annabeth were involved somehow. But he is forbidden from speaking on the issue. Remember, Zeus said nobody could speak on this matter further. But begs Percy to train patiently, that he will be ready when the time comes. Percy then has Annabeth help him to the porch. She mentions she took his advice and wrote to her dad, and they agreed to give it another try. She's going home for the first time in years.
You know what that is? It's gross.
She tells Percy not to get into any trouble without her, and that next summer, they're going on a quest to find Luke for sure, with or without approval. She leaves, and when he's alone, Percy talks to his father even though he isn't there. He tells Poseidon that he'll come back next year to train, and he'll be alright in the mortal world. Oh boy, I forgot how early Annabeth and Percy started using their nicknames for each other, Wise Girl and Seaweed Brain, respectively. It's so cute, they started using it almost immediately. Percy is always so hard on himself, though, especially when we first meet him. The world had already beat him down for so long, and it's sadly all too real for disabled kids to deal with on a regular. Annabeth has such unwavering faith, which makes sense. You have to have faith in your plans if you want them to succeed, after all. And she is the planner of the group. But Percy isn't far behind when it comes to coming up with ideas and strategies of his own. Grover, I forgot how innocent and adorable this kid is, always saying the funniest lines. He's also quite gullible, and would much rather take the easy way out. But same, so. As a start for an epic series, this was a strong start, and an exceptional one at that. I loved all the pollution analogies, and I never tire of the name dropping in regards to famous historic demigods like Harry Houdini. But that's all I have to say for now. Take care, everyone, and I'll catch you all in the next one when we discuss Sea of Monsters. Please share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the Percy Jackson books, about the Lightning Thief, about the characters, whatever. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Bye!
Bye!